Some places wait for you. They don't advertise themselves with signs or invitations. They just sit at the edge of the world, patient as a held breath, until exactly the right person comes wandering by. Nora was 9 years old, and she was exactly the right person. It was the last Saturday of summer, and the fog had rolled in so thick that morning that Nora's mother called it pea soup weather. Nora called it perfect. She pulled on her yellow raincoat, stuffed her notebook into her pocket. She wrote down everything she found interesting, and she found almost everything interesting. And she headed down the hill toward Crabshell Cove, where the shore curved like a crooked finger beckoning you closer. The mist hung so low it swallowed the tops of the rocks. The waves came in soft and whispering, and the whole world smelled of salt and cold stone. Nora loved it. Most kids would have turned back. Nora walked faster. That's when she saw it. At first, she thought it was a hill she'd never noticed before. Then she thought it was a cliff that had fallen in the night. But as she got closer, walking carefully along the tide-slicked rocks, her boots squelching in the dark sand, the shape resolved itself into something that made her stop completely and stare. A ship, an enormous, ancient ship, beached on the shore as though it had simply decided to stop sailing one day and had never left. It was black with age, its great hull rising up like the ribcage of something impossibly large. The masts were still standing, though their sails had long since rotted to grey tatters that drifted in the fog, like ghosts waving hello. Barnacles covered everything. Ropes hung in tangled curtains. The ship looked like it belonged to a world that no longer existed. Nora opened her notebook and wrote, "Old ship, very old, no name on the side that I can see. Where did it come from? Why is it here?" Then she wrote the most important question. How do I get inside? She found a rope ladder on the starboard side. She knew it was starboard because she'd read 17 books about sailing. And Nora remembered everything she read. The ladder swayed when she tested it, but the ropes held firm, stiff, and salt-hardened. She climbed. The deck was stranger than she expected. Strange because it wasn't abandoned the way wrecks were supposed to be. There were no broken timbers, no chaotic mess of disaster. Instead, it looked almost tidy. Coils of rope were neatly stacked. Iron lanterns still hung from hooks, unbroken. A long wooden table ran down the center of the deck, with benches on either side, as if a crew might sit down to eat dinner at any moment. But there was no crew. There was no one at all. And then Nora saw the footprints. They were pressed into a fine layer of soot that dusted the deck. And they were not human footprints. They were paw prints. Cat paw prints, each one perfectly shaped. 4 toe pads and a larger heel pad, except for one unsettling detail. They came from nowhere. They started in the middle of the deck, as if whatever made them had simply appeared out of thin air, wandered in a curious circle, and then dissolved back into nothing. Nora crouched down and studied them carefully. She pressed one finger into the soot beside a print. The soot was warm. She stood up slowly and looked around. The fog pressed close against the sides of the ship. The torn sails whispered. Something made the hair on the back of her neck stand up straight. She was not alone on this ship. She found the door to the captain's cabin below the quarterdeck, its handle a tarnished brass ring shaped like a serpent eating its own tail. Nora hesitated only for a moment before she turned it. The cabin inside was dim and wonderful. Bookshelves lined every wall from floor to ceiling, crammed with books of every size. Maps were pinned everywhere, but they showed places Nora didn't recognize, coastlines that didn't match any continent she knew. At the center of the cabin sat a great oak desk, and on the desk sat a single object, a snow globe. It was beautiful and deeply strange. The glass was perfectly clear, the base carved from dark wood into the shape of a wave frozen mid-curl. And inside the globe, instead of snow, there was a scene rendered in perfect miniature detail. A girl in a yellow raincoat, standing on the deck of a ship, holding something small and glowing in both hands, while above her, a shape made of dark smoke curled against a brightening sky. Nora stared at it. The girl in the yellow raincoat was her. She recognized her own dark braids, her own notebook sticking out of her pocket. But she wasn't holding anything right now, and the sky outside was still gray with fog. The snow globe was showing something that hadn't happened yet. Nora set it down very carefully and backed away one step. That's when the smoke came. It poured in under the cabin door like a dark tide. Not black, not gray, but something in between. The color of a thunderstorm just before it breaks. It moved with impossible purpose, flowing up into the center of the room, thickening and swirling until Nora could see the shape of it. 4 legs, a long tail, curling at the tip, 2 pointed ears, 2 eyes that were not eyes at all, but 2 small absences of smoke, holes in the darkness, perfectly still and perfectly focused on Nora's face. A cat made entirely of smoke. Nora did not scream. She will admit she thought about it. Instead, she said, very quietly, in the voice she used when she was trying not to startle the herons on the marsh, "Hello." The smoke cat's tail flicked. Its knot eyes watched her. It took one slow, drifting step toward her, and Nora saw that with every step it took, the edges of it frayed and thinned, like it was struggling to hold its shape, like it was exhausted. Nora looked at the snow globe. She looked at the smoke cat. She looked at all those maps on the walls showing coastlines that didn't exist, and something clicked together in her mind the way puzzle pieces do when you've been staring at them long enough. She opened her notebook to a blank page, and she began to write down everything she knew. The ship was too neat to be abandoned in panic. Someone had left it on purpose, carefully, with intention. The maps showed impossible places. The snow globe showed the future. And this creature, this smoke cat, was clearly tied to the ship somehow. The warm paw prints in the soot, the way it had appeared the moment she touched the globe, the way it watched her with those empty, longing eyes. She wrote, "Who built this ship?" She wrote, "Someone who could go to impossible places." She wrote, "They're gone now." She wrote, "The cat is still here." She wrote, "Why can't it leave?" She looked up from her notebook. The smoke cat had crept closer while she was writing. It sat now just a few feet away, and she could see it more clearly, could see the way it flickered and wavered, the way the edges of it seemed to be slowly dissolving. There was something around its neck, a collar rendered in slightly denser smoke, and hanging from the collar was the faint outline of a tag. Nora crouched down. She reached out her hand, palm up, the way you offer your hand to a strange dog. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said. "I don't think you're dangerous. I think you're stuck." The smoke cat stared at her for a long moment. Then, with the slow deliberateness of a creature making an enormous decision, it walked forward and pressed its head against her palm. She felt nothing, no fur, no warmth, just the faintest cool pressure like the touch of fog on skin. But the cat's eyes changed. They brightened, just slightly, with something that looked like relief. And just like that, Nora understood the whole story. The ship had been built by a navigator. She found the journals in the bottom desk drawer, written in cramped handwriting that took her a few minutes to decode. His name had been Erasmus Vane, and he had spent his whole life sailing to places other people said were impossible to reach. He had a companion, a smoke cat he called Cinder, a creature who existed between the seen and unseen world and who served as his guide through fog and storm and impossible passage. But Erasmus Vane had grown old, and when he finally took his last voyage, he had meant to take Cinder with him. But somehow, in the leaving, the cat had been left behind, tethered to the ship, unable to leave because the ship itself had been made with a kind of navigator's magic that required someone to release it, someone who could see the future in the snow globe, someone who believed that impossible things were worth attempting. Someone like Nora. She picked up the snow globe. In the tiny scene inside it, the miniature Nora was raising it above her head. Nora looked at the smoke cat. "Is this right?" she asked. "Do I just let go of believing it's impossible?" The smoke cat's tail curled. It blinked its knot eyes slowly. Nora thought about every time she'd been told she was too young, too small, too inexperienced to do something. She thought about how she'd read 17 sailing books and climbed the rope ladder anyway. She thought about how she'd seen a cat made of smoke and said hello instead of running. She held the snow globe up in both hands, exactly like the tiny figure inside it. "Okay, Cinder," she said, and her voice was steady and sure. "Let's do something impossible." She shook the globe. Instead of snow, light spilled out. Soft gold light, like early morning, like the moment before something wonderful happens. It filled the cabin. It rolled across the deck. The fog outside the ship began to thin, and through it, Nora saw something impossible, a shimmer in the air, like a heat mirage, like a doorway made of light and salt water and old journeys. Cinder, the smoke cat, stood up, very tall. The fraying edges of the creature pulled back together. The cat became more solid, more defined, more real than it had been. And then, in one luminous moment, it was no longer made of smoke at all, but of something like light and motion, and the feeling you get in your chest when you finally understand something you've been puzzling over for a long, long time. Cinder turned to look at Nora. Those eyes were warm now. The cat dipped its head once, slowly, like a bow, and then it stepped through the shimmer in the air and was gone. The light faded. The snow globe in Nora's hands showed a new scene now. A girl in a yellow raincoat, standing on the deck of a ship, smiling, with a cat made of stars disappearing into a bright horizon behind her. Nora stood on the deck for a long time after that, breathing the salt air, listening to the waves. Then she opened her notebook and wrote everything down. All of it, every detail, every clue, every step of the solution. Because some stories are too important to forget. She climbed back down the rope ladder as the fog finally burned off and the August sun broke through, turning the water gold and silver. She walked home along the shore with the snow globe tucked safely in her coat pocket, and the sound of something that might have been a distant cat's purr, riding on the wind behind her. Her mother was on the porch when she got home. "Where have you been?" she asked. "You look like you've been on an adventure." "I have," said Nora, and she smiled the smile of someone who has done something impossible and knows with absolute certainty that they can do it again.